Hello, thank you very much for inviting me as one of the speakers for the World Prematurity Day webinar of Nestlé Nutrition Institute. It is a pleasure for me to talk today about the impact of COVID-19 on intensive care units for newborns and what's the parents' perspective. The reason why I'm doing this work, and maybe some of you know me already, I'm also myself a parent who had a preterm birth 24 years ago. It is a long time ago, but at the moment, I really think sometimes it is the same situation as we had 24 years ago when we had our preterm twins born in Munich in an intensive care unit. We had one chair, which we had to share with all the other parents. Our children were born with 515 gram and 290 gram in week 25 after I had a severe preeclampsia, HELLP syndrome, and we had 3 hours visiting time at this time in the afternoon. And you see here one picture where I kangaroo Lucas. It was the first time 1 month after he was born, and our daughter Lena died after 1 week. And the last picture you see my husband Oliver. It is on Father's Day, and in Germany Father's Day is in May. After 3 months he was able to hold the first time his son. And at the moment in the pandemic we have a very similar situation, and I always thought after all the work I have done it's over, but it seems it's even worse at this time. I would like to give you some background information. I mean, all of you know very well that preterm birth and its complication is one of the leading causes of death under 5 years of age. And in all over the world, it is really a challenge. Some countries are much better than others, but we have all over the world the challenge of preterm birth. The pandemic last year arrived all over the world, and we still can remember on these terrible pictures we had from China, we had from Italy, and also from Spain. And in the meanwhile, we are used to have this virus in our world, but for babies and parents born preterm, it's really a challenge. What we have recognized after just a couple of days and weeks that all over the world neonatal units really struggled with the situation that parents had no access to their babies anymore. There was really a huge restriction in these units, and our parent organization addressed this to us when we were in the beginning of the pandemic. The separation, as we all know, can result in long-term health challenges for the babies, but also mental health problems for the parents when they have no access or very limited access to their babies. And again, parents are no visitors, parents are parents and should have always access to their baby. We know that the survival benefit of kangaroo mother care far outweighs the small risk of death due to the COVID-19 infections. And even when we all know this, the hospitals still have these restrictions also when we have access to vaccination, or we have access now to much higher hygiene measurements. The experiences our parent organization shared with us brought us to the decision that we want to look deeper in the situation of parents who have their baby in the neonatal units, or how the parents also experience during birth or even in the time of pregnancy. What we have done is we developed a study, a global multilingual online survey in 23 languages, thanks to our parent organization and healthcare professionals who helped us to translate it. We got a donation from Novartis, and we collaborated with a lot of parent organizations all over the world. So with the neonatal societies, with the parent organizations, we collaborated with NITCAP and also with the nurses. And in the meanwhile, the first publication is already out and the second one is under review. The global report itself will be published or is already published then on November 11. What we have asked? We have asked about the situation during the pregnancy and at birth. We have asked about the parental presence and the skin-to-skin situation. We have asked about the infant nutrition and the breastfeeding, and also about the communication and the health information the parents have received, and the mental health and the support the parents have got. We have finally received 2,103 participations from 56 countries. We had inclusion and exclusion criteria, and we asked the parents in the time of the 1st December 19, inclusive the 30th of November in 2020. And the parents, of course, had to be in the intensive care unit with their child, and they had to be, of course, parents and not healthcare professionals. So therefore, some experts also tried, I guess, to go through this survey. Here you see the map, which parent organizations or parents which parents have answered the questionnaire. And you see here also a lot of gray areas. And the reason why we not reach these regions in the world is that we have no parent organizations and support from this country. So there is still a lot to do for us to get established parent organizations in the low and middle income countries. We asked in this questionnaire if mothers or fathers have answered the questionnaire. So you can see here in the first slide that the majority of participations were mothers. We also asked if the mothers or if the parents were positive tested or the child were positive tested. And you see here also that the majority of parents who participated and still experienced this enormous restriction were negative tested. Also the child were negative tested, and even being negative, the parents experienced such big restrictions. What we have asked in the time frame of pregnancy and the delivery time frame, we asked them if they were permitted to be accompanied by a second person during their pregnancy appointments. And you see here that many or most of them were not allowed to bring a partner or a company person with them. And also in the time of the delivery itself, so during birth, the majority of parents could not bring any partner with them. And we know from WHO that it is strongly recommended to be not alone in the delivery situation, and also to have a partner with them at pregnancy appointments. What we have asked also about the parental presence and the skin-to-skin care is that mothers were allowed to be with their babies in 74 cases, and in 53 cases, it were the fathers. Maybe you say now, well, that's not so bad, but it means that every fourth mother were not allowed to be present with their baby, and every second father were not allowed to be with their babies in this time frame. So that means that 1 in 4 had no access in the end to their baby, and that is quite severe, because when you just count the amount of babies that you are not allowed to be with your baby, that's quite severe. How often were you permitted to have skin-to-skin contact? And again, it's evidence proven how important is skin-to-skin care. And here you see that 28% were not able so far to kangaroo with their baby, to have skin-to-skin care, and 9% only less than once a week. How often were they even allowed to touch their baby? Maybe you say here also, well, 80% were allowed to touch the baby. That means that 1 out of 5 were not allowed to touch their baby. So just imagine you have a baby in the hospital and you are not allowed to touch it, or you're not be allowed to hold it, or even not to be allowed to see it. That's quite a big number. How often were you allowed to see your baby receiving a special intensive care? Here you see that 37% were all the time allowed to see their baby. And then you go in purple that only 15% have never seen the baby. Maybe you say, well, compared to how often parents can see their baby, is it a small number? But again, 3% had only less than once a week access to their baby, once a week 4%. And if you just imagine you have a child in the hospital and around 15 and another 7% have very strict limitation to even see the baby. We are not talking about touching or kangarooing, it's only seeing the baby was such a big restriction. What's about the nutrition and the breastfeeding? Here we see it's a little bit better that the parents or the mother was encouraged, highly encouraged to breastfeed. It's also to somehow we're encouraged to breastfeed. It's not so bad. But again, we want to have breastfeeding or fully breastfed babies. So parents should always be encouraged to provide mother's own milk. And when you see also who was exclusively able to breastfeed, it's around the half of the babies, and partly breastfed 40%. The challenges in the first time of the pandemic was, of course, that 70% were able to provide pumped milk, so expressed milk, and there were also, of course, restriction in not leaving the house, for example, in the very first time of lockdowns. So there was no opportunity to breastfeed or pump at home and provide the milk then in the end with bottles to the and send them to the hospital because of big restrictions even to leave the house. So how was the communication and the mental health in this time frame? Do you feel to receive adequate information about COVID-19 when discharged from hospital? Here we see that 1/4 had not at all information to get in the end information for discharge and follow up at home, and also any kind of information what is important for knowing when you go home in the pandemic with such a baby. We also have to say that even the hospital staff had not all the information. So it was a challenge for both sides, the healthcare professionals, but also the families. And what kind of support was offered to you? And here you see also that around half of them have got no support. I also brought you some parent voices, how they have experienced it. It was terrible for my husband not being allowed to see his baby for nearly 6 weeks. He said he felt totally disconnected from her. I felt the wearing of mask in the unit was inhibiting bonding with my baby. I couldn't kiss her or hold her too close to me, and I didn't want her held up against a dirty face mask. Facilities for parents to make a cup of tea and use the toilet were all closed. Never felt comfortable in the unit because of this. Just imagine a woman who has freshly delivered and in the end has no access to toilets or any kind of facilities. She should drink a lot because she should provide breast milk, but it was not possible at this time. And even today, we have not all hospitals open again as it was before the pandemic. I could see my baby for the first time only 1 month after his birth. Terrible. A baby needs both parents to develop and get well. You should always be allowed to be with the child. It's crazy what is being done with the psychological health of a young family at the moment. We have received such kind of messages really from all over the world. There's not really an excuse of countries who have not experienced such situations. What are the conclusions? We have heard that prenatal care appointments and the births mostly occurred without having a support person present, leaving childbearing women without emotional, informational, and practical support. The presence with the newborn and skin-to-skin care were heavily restricted and still is heavily restricted, especially for fathers. Breastfeeding support was mostly maintained, but we have heard also that providing pumped milk is or was still a challenge. Communication and mental health support were inadequate or lacking, putting additional stress on parents and in an already challenging situation. What we are calling for. We are calling for change and also the evidence-based cornerstone on infant family-centered developmental care. It needs to be in place again, and it should stop because we have the hygiene measurements in the meanwhile, we have the opportunity to test, and we have the access to vaccination. We call for a zero separation policy and an immediate, sensible and compassionate lifting of existing restrictive visitation policy. Parents are no visitors, parents are parents. Infant family-centered care must be reinstalled where it was discontinued. It must be promoted where it was questioned, and it must be protected where it was restricted. And I would close my presentation with these two pictures. You see one picture where a mom only can hold a picture of her baby because she has no access to them. Just imagine how bonding should take place, how this mom feels all the time, and also when the baby comes home. Some of the parents have seen their baby not at all. That means after 4.5 months, they get their baby not knowing if it is theirs. Then you see the other picture where both father and mother can bath their baby, feeling they are the parents of this baby. There is a need of changing the minds. It has to be done now, and we have to act to change the situation for a more normal family baby bonding. And we hope we can start now and not have to wait until the pandemic is over, because it will still take some months or potentially even years. Thank you very much for your attention.